small boy with dirt on his ankles stood barefoot on polished marble, the city skyline blazing behind him through floor-to-ceiling glass. In front of him was a steel monster of a safe, taller than he was, built into the wall like a vault in a bank. Around him, men in pressed suits and shiny shoes smirked over crystal glasses. The richest man in that room leaned on his black marble counter and said in a lazy voice, "Kid, I'll put $100 million in your name if you can open that thing." The room exploded with laughter. Someone choked on his drink. Another slapped the countertop like it was the funniest joke he'd heard all year. But the boy did not laugh. His thin chest rose and fell. His hands were shaking not from fear but from how cold the steel felt when his fingers brushed it. A small green light blinked to life near the keypad. Then another. Conversations died mid-sentence. Jokes cut off in the air. One of the executives stepped forward, eyes wide. The rich man's smile froze on his face as the safe gave a tiny mechanical sigh, a sound no one had heard in years. Before we find out what happens next, take a second to help this channel grow. Hit that like button and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories straight to you. That shocking moment in the penthouse did not start there. It began far below that glass palace on the street where hot concrete burned bare feet and no one knew a boy's name. The sun was still climbing when light spilled over the tall buildings in downtown Chicago. It turned office windows into sheets of gold and made the metal rails on the sidewalks too hot to touch. 10-year-old Noah Reed stepped carefully onto the sidewalk, placing his feet only where the shadows from the buildings fell. He had learned a long time ago that darker patches of ground hurt less. His toes were dusty. The elastic in his old gray shorts had been tied in a knot to keep them from falling. The blue t-shirt he wore had a small hole near the collar, and the faded logo on the front was so worn that nobody could tell what picture it used to be. Backpack bounced against his back with every step. It was tan once, now a mix of tan and gray, with one broken zipper and two safety pins holding one strap together. Inside it were exactly three things that mattered to him: a half-empty math workbook from school, a pencil with someone else's name written on it in marker, and a folded flyer from a soup kitchen that gave free meals on Fridays. Today was not Friday. Today was Tuesday. His stomach already knew the difference. Noah stopped at the corner and looked up. There it was again, the building that had chased him into his dreams for 3 nights in a row. A silver-blue tower that seemed to scrape the clouds. Cole Financial Tower. He had learned the name from the security guard yelling at a delivery guy yesterday. The glass on the outside reflected the whole sky, and when the wind was strong, it almost looked like the building was breathing. Noah wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand and took a deep breath like he did before tests at school. "Okay," he whispered to himself, "just remember the pattern." Cars rushed past him, horns beeping, people yelling into their phones, coffee in one hand, stress in the other. Nobody noticed the barefoot boy on the corner counting under his breath as he studied the tall front doors of Cole Tower. He had watched this spot yesterday and the day before, hiding behind a newspaper stand or pretending to look inside the big cafe window. Every time someone important came, the same thing happened. A driver pulled up, the tall doors swung open, and a man in a dark suit scanned a card near a small black screen on the left side of the entrance. A green light blinked. Then he punched in a code on a tiny keypad. The doors clicked open, smooth and soft. Most people only saw rich people going in and out. Noah saw numbers. He saw hands moving in patterns, 2 quick taps, 1 long press, a pause, 3 more taps. He did not know the code, not yet. But his mind, the same mind that used to sit awake at night turning his homework questions into games, had started to build something piece by piece, like a puzzle where the picture was still blurry. He shifted the backpack strap on his shoulder and sighed. He had not told his mother where he was going. She thought he was at the small community library 4 blocks from their apartment. If she knew he was standing outside a building where security guards wore earpieces and rich men wore watches that cost more than their rent for a year, she would have dragged him home by his ear. Home. The word felt too big for the place they slept. It was 1 room in a tired brick building. The wallpaper peeled in corners and the pipes made noise at night. There was 1 bed pushed against the wall that creaked when someone sat on it. His mom, Mia, slept on the side closest to the door so she could get up quickly when her alarm went off at 4 in the morning. Noah slept on the inside, pressed against a pile of folded clothes they used as a second pillow. When his mom left for her first job at the laundry, she always thought he was asleep. He never was. He listened to her soft footsteps, the click of the door, and the careful way she turned the lock so it would not wake him up. He would wait until the sound of her shoes faded in the hallway, then sit up and stare at the crack in the ceiling he had named the river, because when it rained, little droplets formed and traveled along it. He would think about how different his life might be if his dad had stayed, if he had not left one day with a suitcase and a promise that he never kept. "I'll send money back when things pick up," his dad had said. That was 2 years ago. The only thing that had picked up since then were the bills. But Noah's mom did not like talking about what was missing. She liked talking about numbers. She showed him how to count the coins in the jar above the fridge, the one marked rent in black marker. She traced out numbers on a paper napkin, showing him how to subtract the electric bill from the laundromat paycheck. "Numbers don't lie," she always said with a tired smile. "You just have to learn how to read what they're saying." Maybe that was why Noah liked patterns so much. They made the world feel less random, less like bad things just happened out of nowhere. Patterns meant there were reasons, and if there were reasons, maybe there were answers too. He had not planned to notice the code at Cole Tower. On Saturday, he had just been walking by, staring at the reflection of the clouds on the glass, when a black car pulled up. The door opened and two men stepped out, talking loudly. One of them, a tall man with silver at his temples, had laughed and said to the other, "You know he keeps that safe locked even during parties, says not even God could crack it." They were close enough that Noah could smell the cologne and see their shiny watches. He didn't know who he was yet, but the way they said it made something twist inside his chest. A safe no one could open, a building he could not enter, codes he could not yet see. That night he had dreamed of numbers, lines of digits climbing up walls like vines, forming doors and locks and keys. When he woke up, sweat sticking his shirt to his back, only one thought remained clear in his mind: he needed to see the entrance again. And so he came back Sunday, and Monday, and now Tuesday. Each time he stayed a little longer, each time he watched a few more hands type in the code. Some people blocked it with their bodies, some moved too fast, but others in their rush typed clearly enough that he could catch pieces. 2, 7, something in the middle that ended with a 5, a last tap that might have been a 9 or a 3. He could not go inside, but his mind could. It walked through the numbers over and over until something inside him began to hum. Now, as he looked up at Cole Tower again, that humming feeling was back, stronger, louder. "Noah!" He flinched at his name and spun around. A woman stood near the cafe window holding a tray with paper cups, steam curling up into the hot air. She wore a green apron with the word Riverbrew on it and had her dark hair tied back under a cap. Her name tag said Kayla. She was the one who sometimes slipped him a muffin that was too ugly to sell, or a small cup of hot chocolate in winter if the manager wasn't starring too hard. "Hey," she said, stepping closer. "You're back here again, you okay?" He nodded quickly and tried to look casual, like kids always stood outside giant money buildings all morning. "Yeah, just walking." Her eyes drifted to his bare feet, still no shoes. He glanced down. They broke. It was half true. The soles had worn thin and the last rain had finished them off. His mom said they'd try to find a pair at the charity store on Saturday when she got her second paycheck. Saturday felt like a year away. Kayla shifted the tray to one hand and reached into her apron pocket with the other. She pulled out a small brown paper bag and pressed it into his hand. The warmth spread through the thin paper. "Don't tell my boss," she whispered. "He thinks everything old should go in the trash. I think old things still have some good left in them." He smiled, a real one that reached his eyes. "Thank you." She was about to turn away when she noticed where his gaze kept drifting, to the main entrance of Cole Tower. The shiny doors, the keypad, the men in suits. "You like watching the important people?" she asked lightly. He shrugged, "Just looking." "What's so interesting?" He considered lying, but something about her face, kind and curious, made him speak the truth instead. "The code," he said simply. She blinked. "The what?" "The code to the door," he replied, nodding towards the keypad. "They think no one sees it, but they do the same moves every day. They change it sometimes, but not always all of it. They're scared of forgetting, so they keep part of it the same." Kayla stared at him for a long moment, her lips parted, then she let out a short laugh, not mocking, just surprised. How do you even notice that? He shifted the bag from one hand to the other. I like patterns, he mumbled. My teacher says my brain grabs numbers like other kids grab soccer balls. Is that what you want to do, work with numbers? She asked. He thought of his mom and the rent jar. He thought of the stack of bills in the kitchen drawer. I want to fix numbers that hurt people, he said quietly, like bills and debts and things like that. Kayla smiled sadly. Then maybe one day you'll own a building like that instead of just watching it. He opened his mouth to answer, but a shout cut through the air. Hey kid! Noah's heart jumped. A security guard in a dark blue uniform was striding towards him from the front doors, his face tight, jaw clenched. He was taller up close, the kind of tall that could block the sun. You can't hang around here all morning, the guard barked. This is private property. Noah stepped back, clutching the warm paper bag in one hand and his backpack strap in the other. I wasn't doing anything, he said quickly. I was just watching people punch in door codes, the guard snapped. I've seen you 3 days in a row, you think we don't notice? Kayla stepped in between them, balancing her tray. He's just a kid, Mark, he's not hurting anyone. Mark the guard barely glanced at her. Rules are rules, go on kid, move along, find somewhere else to stand. Noah swallowed, his face burned with shame. People on the sidewalk began to look, their eyes sliding over him like he was something stuck to the ground. He turned to leave, the dream of the building and the code crumpling inside his chest like old paper. That was when the black car pulled up, sleek, expensive, quiet. It rolled to a perfect stop in front of the doors like it owned the pavement. The driver jumped out, opened the back door, and the energy on the sidewalk shifted. People moved faster, heads turned, phones were lowered. A man stepped out of the car. Noah did not know who he was yet, but he could feel the weight he carried without even trying. The man's dark suit fell perfectly over broad shoulders. His tie was silver, matching the silver in his hair at his temples. He wore no watch, no obvious jewelry, but everyone somehow knew he was the richest person in that space. He walked with the ease of someone who had never had to count coins in a jar. Mark straightened at once. Mr. Cole, good morning, sir. His voice, rough and sharp when speaking to Noah, turned smooth and respectful. So this is him, Noah thought. The name some of the men had said on Saturday, the owner of the tower, the one with the safe no one could open. Evan Cole did not look at Noah at first. His gaze skimmed over the entrance, the doors, the security camera above, the people moving aside to make room. Then, as he reached for his access card, something on the ground caught his eye. A folded piece of paper near the step, half fluttered open by the breeze. Hold on, he said. His voice was deep and calm, but people stopped anyway. He bent down, picked up the paper, and unfolded it. It was a thin white envelope, the kind banks used for receipts. Across the front, in black print, were the words, Contract, Safe Room Access, Confidential. The driver paled. Sir, that must have fallen from the file this morning. I didn't see. Evan's eyes hardened for a fraction of a second, then he turned the envelope over. It was sealed, untouched. He slid it into his jacket pocket. We'll talk later, he said quietly. His gaze moved then, finally landing on Noah. Bare feet, dusty knees, the backpack with safety pins, the paper bag clutched in one hand, the security guard standing stiff beside him. The cafe worker hovering close. Is there a problem? Evan asked. Mark cleared his throat. No, sir, just moving this kid along. He's been hanging around the building. Something flickered across Evan's face. Annoyance, curiosity, it was hard to tell. Hanging around doing what? He's been watching the entrance, sir, Mark replied quickly. Watching people punch in the code, I thought. You thought a 10-year-old was going to storm the building? Kayla cut in, unable to help herself. He's just a kid. Evan's eyes shifted to her. He seemed to file her face away in his memory, then returned his gaze to Noah. "You've been watching the door?" he asked. Noah's throat felt dry. Every part of him wanted to run, but his feet stayed rooted to the warm cement. I like patterns," he said softly, "that's all." "Patterns," Evan repeated, tasting the word. "What kind of patterns?" Noah shrugged, his ears burning. "How they type, where their fingers go, which numbers they press." Mark made a strangled noise. "Sir, he's just trying to sound smart." Evan ignored him. "And why," he asked, "would you care about that?" Noah swallowed and looked up, really looked at the man in front of him. There was something in Mr. Cole's eyes that didn't match the polished suit and perfect car. Something tired, something sharp. "Because," Noah said slowly, "if people lock something up that tight, it must mean it's really important. And I want to know what's so important that everyone is scared someone else will take it." The sidewalk seemed to hold its breath. Even the hiss of the bus brakes down the street faded. One corner of Evan Cole's mouth lifted, not exactly in a smile, more like in interest. "What's your name?" "Noah." "How old are you, Noah?" 10. "You in school?" "Yes." "Good at it?" Noah thought of his math quizzes lined up on the fridge under chipped magnets. "I like math," he admitted, "and puzzles." Evan tapped a finger lightly on the black screen beside the door. "You think this is a puzzle?" "Yes," Noah said before he could stop himself, "just a hard one." Silence stretched for one long second, then Evan laughed. It was not a cruel laugh, but it made some of the people around him relax, like they had been waiting for a sign that everything was still normal. "You know," he said, turning to his driver and the guard, "I've had grown hackers, safe experts, and engineers try to break into my systems. Now I've got a barefoot kid calling my security a hard puzzle." The executive, standing just inside the doors, watching through the glass, chuckled. Someone whispered, "That's new," under his breath. Evan looked back at Noah. "You hungry?" Noah blinked. "Sir." "You look like you could use more than whatever is in that bag." He nodded toward the paper bag, still warm in Noah's hand. "Come upstairs with me, we'll get some breakfast. You can tell me more about these patterns of yours." Mark stepped forward quickly. "Sir," bringing him up to the penthouse, "that's—" Evan cut him off with a small gesture. "Relax, Mark, you and the cameras will still be here. If a 10-year-old takes down my company, I deserve to lose it." Light laughter rippled through the small crowd. Kayla's eyes met Noah's, wide with surprise and a hint of warning, but under that was something else too, hope. "Go," she mouthed. Noah's heart thudded against his ribs. No one had ever invited him inside a building like this, much less all the way upstairs. He nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "Good," Evan replied. He held the door open himself, and for the first time in 3 days, Noah stepped through the entrance of Cole Tower not as a shadow but as a guest. The lobby swallowed him whole. Cold air wrapped around his skin, making the sweat on his neck turn into a shiver. The floors shone like mirrors. Every step he took, his reflection walked with him. Chandeliers hung above like upside-down trees made of glass. People moved quickly in every direction, tapping on phones, holding folders, talking in voices that sounded important. He could feel eyes on him, on his bare feet, his worn clothes, his safety-pin backpack. But he kept walking, following the man in the perfect suit. They reached a row of silver elevators. Evan swiped a card, pressed a button, and one door opened with a soft chime. They stepped inside. The elevator walls were shiny too. Noah could see 20 versions of himself in the reflections. The doors closed and his ears popped as they began to rise. Numbers lit up above the door: 10, 27, 40, 51. "Penthouse," Evan said casually, as if the word meant nothing. Noah clutched the strap of his backpack, his stomach doing flips. He had never been higher than the 4th floor of any building. His home was on the 3rd. This felt like flying. "First time in an elevator?" Evan asked. "First time this high," Noah answered honestly. Evan watched him for a moment, then looked away. "You know," he said, more to himself than to Noah, "people pay a lot of money to see the view you're about to see." Noah did not know what to say to that, so he stared at the glowing numbers instead. When the elevator finally stopped, the doors opened onto a hallway that didn't look like a hallway at all. It looked like a quiet, expensive hotel lobby, soft gray carpet, paintings on the walls, a big plant in a white pot taller than Noah. At the end of the hall was a single door. Evan placed his hand on a scanner beside it, and after a small pause, the lock clicked open. "Welcome to the top, Noah," he said, pushing the door open. The penthouse took the breath straight out of the boy's chest. Windows stretched from the floor all the way up to the high ceiling on three sides of the room, showing the city spread out like a toy model far below. Cars were tiny dots. People were barely specks. The river glowed silver in the distance. The sky felt close enough to touch. Inside, everything looked too perfect to touch. White couches sat in neat lines on a huge rug. A long table made of dark wood shone without a single scratch. There was a kitchen in one corner with marble counters and metal appliances that looked like they had never been used. On the far wall, half hidden behind a piece of modern art that looked like bent metal, was the safe, tall, gray, silent. Noah's eye snagged on it and stayed there. "Evan noticed you like that ugly box," he asked lightly. "It doesn't look ugly," Noah said quietly. "It looks serious." Evan huffed a small laugh. Serious is one word for it. A few men and women in suits were already there, gathered near the window with tablets and folders. They turned as Evan walked in. "Morning, sir," one of them said. "We're ready to go over the quarterly." Evan raised a hand. "Later, I have a different kind of meeting first." He tilted his head toward Noah. "Everyone, this is Noah. He's been studying our front door patterns from the street." There was a ripple of amused surprise. A woman with red glasses looked at Noah's bare feet and arched an eyebrow. "Well," she said, "that's one kind of field research." Evan moved to the kitchen counter, opened a drawer, and pulled out a box of cereal. He poured some into a bowl, added milk from the fridge, and slid it towards Noah along with a spoon. "Eat," he said simply. Noah hesitated. The bowl was heavy. The cereal looked like the expensive kind he saw in ads, not the plain kind they bought when it was on sale. His stomach growled loud enough that one of the men near the window turned his head. "Thank you," Noah murmured. He took a bite. The sugar hit his tongue and made his eyes sting for a reason that had nothing to do with the taste. "While you eat," Evan said, leaning on the counter, "tell me more about these patterns. How many times have you watched the door?" "3 days," Noah answered between small bites. "I watched maybe 20 people type the code. Some blocked it, some were too fast, but I could see parts." "And you think you could guess the rest?" Noah swallowed. "Not guess," he said. "Calculate. They change some numbers but not all. People are scared to forget, so they keep a piece the same. If I had longer, I could be sure." One of the executives laughed softly. "Listen to this kid. Calculate. You've been hearing from elementary schools now, sir." Evan ignored the comment. His eyes stayed on Noah, studying, weighing. After a moment, he pushed away from the counter and walked toward the safe. "Do you know what this is, Noah?" he asked, resting a hand on the steel door. "A safe," Noah replied. "Not just any safe," one of the execs added, stepping closer. "This thing is custom-built, military-grade, fireproof, flood-proof, bomb-proof. They say no one can crack it without the code." Noah's eyes never left the door. "Nothing is impossible," he said under his breath. The woman with red glasses smirked. Big words for a little guy. Evan turned his head slightly. "You believe that, Noah, that nothing is impossible?" He thought of his mom's hands, red and raw from folding clothes in hot steam all day. He thought of the coin jar above the fridge, never quite full. He thought of the nights she sat at the table, head in her hands, bills spread out around her like a storm. He lifted his chin. "I have to," he said. "If I don't, then nothing will ever change." The room went quiet for a moment. Even the soft hum of the air conditioner seemed to fade. Then Evan chuckled, the sound low and sharp. He turned fully to face his team, still standing near the windows with their tablets and expensive shoes. "You hear that?" he said. "Kid got more belief than half the people in this room." He looked back at the safe, then at Noah, and something like mischief sparked in his eyes. "You know," he said slowly, "this safe has been a running joke in this company." "What do you mean?" the red glasses woman asked. "I mean," Evan said, "I've had highly paid experts, security teams, and even the manufacturer themselves come in here and try to open this thing after the system glitched 2 years ago. The code entry got scrambled during an update. It locked itself. They all told me the same thing: we can drill it, but you'll lose what's inside and the art around it, or you can leave it closed." "Isn't there important stuff in there?" one of the men asked. Evan's jaw flexed. "There is, very important." Noah felt a strange pull, like the safe was calling his name. So the man pressed. "So I left it closed," Evan replied simply. "Figured if fate wanted it locked, it would stay locked, but then this kid shows up, seeing patterns where other people see nothing." The woman with glasses snorted. "You're not seriously thinking." "Why not?" Evan cut in. He turned back to Noah with a half-smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "We're all bored to death with quarterly reports anyway." He walked back to the counter where Noah's now half-empty bowl sat. "Noah," he said, "let's play a game." Noah's fingers tightened around the spoon. "What kind of game?" "The kind you said you like," Evan answered. "Puzzles, code breaking. Let's say I let you walk up to that safe and try to open it." Every face in the room snapped toward Evan, then toward Noah. Disbelief hung in the air like static. Evan continued, almost too casually. "If you open it, I'll put $100 million in a trust for you, managed by my people. You'll go to any school you want. Your mother won't have to work double shifts again. You won't have to stand outside buildings watching door codes to feed yourself." Noah's brain nearly stopped. $100 million, it was too big to picture. He saw it instead as real things: shoes, a bed that didn't creak, a fridge that was full, his mom sleeping past 4 in the morning, her shoulders without that permanent slump of tired. The executives burst into laughter, the sound loud and sharp after the heavy silence. "Come on, sir," one of them said between chuckles. "You're kidding." "This is a joke, right?" another added. $100 million for a street kid." "This will be fun to watch," the woman with glasses said dryly. "The safe won't even beep for him." Evan let them laugh. He even smiled a little. "Of course," he said, his tone light but his eyes hard. "If he can't do it, then nothing changes. The safe stays closed. I go back to my meetings. You all go back to arguing over graphs." He goes back downstairs. Noah's chest squeezed. He knew what back downstairs meant: back to the hot sidewalk, back to the heavy air of the tiny room, back to watching numbers he was never allowed to touch. He looked at the safe, he looked at Evan. "What if it's not possible?" he whispered. "Then you'll have tried," Evan said, "and you'll know it is, but if you say no without trying, you'll never know at all." The bowl of cereal sat forgotten. Noah's hands were sweating, his legs felt like they might give out, but under all the fear was that same hum he had felt outside the building, stronger now, louder, like a song only he could hear. He set the spoon down carefully. "Okay," he said, his voice small but steady, "I'll try." The laughter in the room rose again, some of it amused, some of it nervous. It wasn't every day that their boss made a promise he could keep, or might have to keep. Evan pushed off the counter and walked back toward the safe, stopping a few feet away. He gestured with his hand. "Come on then, Noah, show us what those patterns of yours can do." Noah slid off the tall kitchen stool. His bare feet sank into the soft rug for a moment, then touched the cool wood floor as he stepped closer. Every step sounded too loud in his ears. His heartbeat seemed to echo off the glass windows. He could feel the eyes on his back, men and women who had studied in big schools and earned more money in a month than his mom had seen in years. He could feel their doubts pressing in on him like a heavy coat that wasn't his size. At the same time, he could feel something else, a picture forming in his head, sharp and clear, his mom's tired face, the coin jar, the crack in the ceiling they called the river. He kept moving, one step, another. He stopped when he was finally standing right in front of the safe. Up close, it was even bigger, the steel door thick, the handle solid. The keypad sat on the right side, a grid of small black squares, each one waiting for a finger. Above it, a tiny screen, dark for now. Noah lifted his hand, then dropped it again. "Take your time," Evan said from behind him. He sounded almost amused. "We've already waited 2 years, another minute won't kill us." Someone snickered, another whispered, "This is ridiculous." Noah closed his eyes for a second. He pictured the front door keypad downstairs, the fingers he had watched, index finger pressing the same sequence again and again, the way some people hesitated on the fourth number then hit the last two quickly. He took a slow breath, then another. He opened his eyes and placed his fingers lightly on the edge of the keypad. The plastic was cool, solid. His hand looked very small against it. "Remember," he told himself silently, "they're scared of forgetting, so they don't change everything, only some of it." He thought of the man on Monday who had typed 27-something-59, of the woman who had typed 27-something-53, of the older guard who had moved slower, his fingers pressing 27459. The middle number changed. The last one sometimes changed. The first two and the fourth seemed to stay. 27-something-5-something. He could almost feel the numbers floating in the air in front of him, waiting to fall into place like pieces in a puzzle. "You've got this," a small voice whispered in his head. It sounded like his mom's on the nights she tucked him in. "You see things other people don't forget that." His hand stopped shaking just a little. He reached for the first square and pressed. Beep. The tiny screen lit up, showing a single dash. He pressed the second number. Beep. Behind him, the room had gone so quiet that he could hear someone's soft breathing. He moved to the third number, the one that changed. If he got this wrong, the system might lock him out, or sound an alarm, or just go dead. He thought of how security systems worked in the books he sometimes read in the library. He thought of what most people did when asked to change a code. They changed the middle, kept the ends. "Don't think like most people," his brain argued with itself. "Think like someone who built it, someone who is scared but smart." He shifted his finger to a different square than the one he first thought of. Beep. A second line appeared on the screen. "Come on, kid," someone muttered under their breath. "Let's end the show." He moved to the fourth, that one he was sure of. He pressed it without hesitation. Beep. Third line. His breathing sounded loud in his own ears now. He wiped his hand on his shorts, leaving a faint streak of sweat. 2 more numbers, 2 more chances to be wrong. Suddenly, he remembered something small, something his mother had once said about people and their secrets. They always keep a tiny piece of themselves somewhere in what they hide. A date, a name, a number that means something only to them. What number would matter to a man like Evan Cole? What number would he build into the thing that held what he couldn't bear to lose? Noah's mind shot back to something from Saturday, 2 men laughing outside the building. "He still uses the same numbers," one had joked. "Can't believe he never changed that after." The rest of the sentence had been swallowed by the rush of a passing bus. "After what?" His heart hammered. "Anytime now," someone said sharply. Noah shut out the voices, shut out the room, shut out everything but the keypad and the quiet hum in his chest. He pressed the fifth number. Beep. The screen did not flash red, no angry buzz, just another line. A small gasp came from behind him. "One more." He hovered his finger over the keypad, moving it slightly from one square to another. The choice felt heavy, like holding the future in the tip of his finger. School, shoes. his mother's tired smile turning real again, or the sound of a harsh buzz and laughter that would stick in his memory forever. He squeezed his eyes shut for half a second, saw his mom standing in the doorway of their small room, rubbing her neck, saying, "One day something good is going to break our way, Noah. Don't stop believing that, no matter what this world throws at us." He opened his eyes. His finger came down. Beep. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The world hung there, still and fragile, like it was waiting to see which way it would fall. Then the safe made a sound no one in that room had heard in 2 long years. A soft, heavy click echoed through the penthouse, followed by the low whir of internal bolts shifting. A small green light above the door flashed once, then stayed on. Gasps burst around the room. Someone swore under their breath. The woman with red glasses dropped her tablet and it clattered onto the floor. Noah's knees felt weak. His hand fell away from the keypad. He stared at the safe, not daring to breathe. Behind him, for the first time since Noah had met him that morning, the rich man in the perfect suit did not laugh. His voice was quiet, almost disbelieving. "No way," Evan whispered. He stepped forward slowly, every eye in the room locked on him, on Noah, on the safe that now hummed softly like a sleeping giant waking up. His hand reached for the handle. He wrapped his fingers around the cold metal. And as he began to pull, the door of the safe moved. Just an inch. Just enough to show the dark line of the gap opening and the faint hint of something inside. A corner of a thick envelope, the edge of a black box, maybe something else entirely, before the scene cut off like a film reel stopping in mid-frame. The steel door creaked wider, the heavy sound rolling through the penthouse like thunder trapped indoors, and for a second everyone seemed to lean forward at the same time without meaning to, as if some invisible rope had tugged them toward the dark opening. Noah stood frozen inches away. The hum in his chest now mixed with a sharp fear he did not understand, and the smell that drifted out of the safe surprised him. It wasn't metal or dust or paint, but something softer, like old paper and a faint trace of the kind of perfume rich people wore to events on television. Evan's fingers tightened on the handle as the gap widened, his jaw muscles pulling tight, and when the door finally swung open all the way, he did not move at once. The executives behind him forgot to pretend they were calm. One man's mouth dropped open, the woman with red glasses covered her lips with her hand, and someone else whispered, "No way," before cutting himself off. Inside the safe, the light from the penthouse windows fell on shelves and compartments, neat and ordered, but it wasn't piles of gold bars or stacks of money that stared back at them. On the middle shelf, in the very center, as if it was the most important thing in the world, sat a framed photograph. Noah could see it clearly from where he stood. A smiling woman with kind eyes and curly hair pulled into a loose bun, standing in a park beside a little girl who looked about Noah's age with dark braids and a bright yellow dress. They were both laughing at something just out of the frame. Their hands linked, sunlight on their faces, and the sight of it pressed on Noah's chest like a weight he couldn't name. Beneath the photo lay a sealed black envelope, thick and worn around the edges like someone had picked it up many times but never opened it. And beside that was a narrow wooden box with smooth sides and a small silver latch. On the bottom shelf sat several thick folders tied with a faded blue ribbon, and a fireproof metal case the size of a laptop. Everyone watched Evan as if he might explode or collapse or slam the door shut again, but he did none of those things. Instead, he reached in slowly, like his own safe might bite him, and took out the photograph first. His hands, which had been steady when he joked about $100 million, trembled just enough that Noah noticed. Evan stared at the picture for a long time. Long enough that the people behind him started shifting their weight, clearing their throats, glancing at each other with questions they did not dare say out loud. To them, this was their boss seeing something personal. To Noah, this was something else. He could not explain it, but he knew, the same way he knew when numbers lined up, that this picture mattered more than anything else in that safe. Evan's eyes grew shiny, not with anger but with something heavier that he pushed down fast. He set the photograph carefully on the counter behind him as if he was afraid the glass might break, then reached back into the safe for the black envelope. When he lifted it, faint writing on the front caught the light. Noah squinted, trying to read it, but he was too far away. The woman with red glasses, who had regained her voice, stepped closer. "Sir," she said gently, "are you sure you want to do this now? We can clear the room if you'd like privacy." Her words carried something Noah had not heard in her voice before, respect not just for his money but for the man himself. Evan did not look at her. He kept his eyes on the envelope, his thumb brushing the old crease across the middle. "No," he said after a moment, his tone soft but final. "We've waited long enough." And he gave a small nod toward Noah without fully turning. "He's earned the right to see what he opened." The executives exchanged confused glances. It was one thing for the kid to punch random numbers into a keypad, it was another to let him see whatever their boss had locked up with that much care. But none of them said no. They were too busy trying to understand the strange mix of pride and pain in Evan's voice. Evan slid a finger under the seal and opened the envelope with slow, careful movements. Inside was a stack of papers folded neatly. He unfolded the first page and held it up just enough for the nearest people to read the top line. The woman with red glasses gasped. "It's a will," she whispered. That's your will." Several heads jerked back like someone had slapped them. The word hung in the air between them. Will, not a simple letter, not a memo. A map for what would happen when the man who owned the tower, the company, the penthouse, was gone. Noah did not understand everything about wills, but he had heard the word before. His mother once joked that they had nothing to leave but unpaid bills, so she didn't need one. Still, he could feel the way that one word changed the room. It made the air feel heavier. It made the safe seem bigger. Evan's eyes scanned the first lines. His brow furrowed, his face paling slightly. This isn't the last version," he murmured. "This is the one from before." "Before what?" one of the men asked without thinking. Evan did not answer. His gaze skimmed further down the page and his fingers tightened so sharply that the paper crinkled. Then his lips pressed into a thin line and he lowered the will, his eyes unfocused for a second as if he was remembering something far away and painful. Noah's stomach twisted. He didn't know why, but he felt like he had just stepped into someone's open wound. One of the other executives, a man with a close-cropped beard and a tie that had tiny blue dots, took a cautious step forward. "Sir, is everything okay? We can call your lawyer, have him bring the updated documents. We don't have to." "My lawyer," Evan said sharply, cutting him off. He let out a humorless breath. "Funny you mention him." He turned to the safe again, set the will down, and picked up one of the thick folders tied with the blue ribbon. When he untied it and opened it, a few photos slid loose onto the counter. They showed a small house with peeling paint, bills laid out on a cheap table, a hospital bed in a crowded room, and a young woman with tired eyes holding a baby. Noah's heart skipped. The house in the picture looked like his building. Not just any building, a brick pattern near the corner, a small crack above the door, the crooked railing. It looked almost exactly like the place he and his mother lived in, only with different faces inside. Evan stared at one photo longer than the rest. It was the woman and the little girl again, this time in a hospital room. The girl's hair was shorter, as if it had been cut during a long stay. A stuffed cat sat on the bed beside her little hand. The woman's smile was soft and tired, like she was holding up the world with nothing but hope. Under the photo, in neat handwriting, were two words Noah could just make out when the photo caught the light: "For Lily." "For who?" one of the executives asked, peering over, and Noah realized he had said the name out loud without meaning to. Evan stiffened. His eyes flicked to the boy, then back to the picture. "My daughter," he said quietly, and just like that the room shifted again. The word daughter sat heavy in the air, pulling down every other sound. Some of the executives looked down, remembering rumors they had heard years ago about an accident, about a child, about their boss disappearing from meetings for a long time and coming back harder and colder. Others had never heard anything, but they could read the story in the lines on his face. Noah's breath caught. There was something in the way Evan said "my daughter" that dug into a part of him that still missed a father who never came back. He stared at the picture, at the girl in the yellow dress in the first photo and in the hospital in the second, and felt a strange ache for someone he had never met. Evan set the photo down next to the first frame and closed the folder slowly. "These files," he said, his voice low, "were supposed to be part of a foundation, a promise." He tapped the blue ribbon. "We were going to help children from poor neighborhoods, kids with health problems, families drowning in medical bills. The plan, the money, the structure, it was all here." He pointed at the safe. "We were going to start with one building, one street, one group of kids. That's what she wanted." He nodded toward the picture of the woman and the girl. "Sorry." The man with the dotted tie said carefully, "We all knew you were looking at charities with them. We thought you canceled everything after the accident. You told us the files were lost. I told you what my lawyer told me, Evan said sharply, and now there was anger in his voice, hot and sharp. He said the foundation papers were gone, that things were too messy, that we needed to focus on clean assets and strong investments. He said we'd revisit it later when things settled. He let out a bitter laugh. Funny how later never comes when the people you planned it with are gone. He lifted one of the other folders and flipped through it. Zoning approvals, transfer agreements. A list of addresses. His finger skimmed down the page, then stopped. His eyes narrowed. Coal properties, he read, his tone flat. Low-income buildings, deferred repairs, rent increases. His mouth twisted. They slid this into the same file. The foundation was supposed to buy these buildings, renovate them, lower rent, and use the profits from the company to keep them running. Instead, he tossed the folder onto the counter. Papers slid out, one stopping near Noah's hand. The boy's eyes caught on the grainy photo attached to it. The building in that photo was not just like his home, it was his home. The same broken window on the second floor, the same faded awning over the entrance. His pulse leaped. The small print under the picture read, Property 18B, rent increase scheduled, eviction notices prepared if unpaid. Noah's chest squeezed so tight he thought he might stop breathing. His fingers brushed the edge of the paper. This, he croaked, his voice coming out rough and small at the same time. This is where I live. The whole room turned to him. Evan frowned. What did you say? That building, Noah said, forcing his voice louder. That's my building. Our door is there. He pointed at a tiny dark rectangle on the photo. Third floor, right corner. A strange silence fell. It wasn't the mocking silence from before. It wasn't business silence either. It was the silence of a puzzle piece slipping into place with a soft click. Evan stepped closer, picked up the paper, and looked from the photo to Noah and back again. What's your address? He asked. Noah told him. The man with the dotted tie typed it into his tablet, his fingers moving quick. A second later, the tablet beeped and the man's eyes widened. He's right, he said. Property 18B, it's one of ours, managed under a shell company. Eviction notices? Evan asked, his voice low and dangerous now. The man swallowed. Yes, sir, for chronic late payments. Repairs have been delayed due to budget reallocations, according to the notes. Noah felt hot and cold at the same time. Eviction. He had heard the word on the stairs when their neighbor argued with the landlord. He had seen a paper with big letters shoved under someone's door. He had prayed he and his mom would never see one with their name. He thought of his mother at the laundry folding clothes that did not belong to her, saying, "We just have to hang on until my hours go up, then we'll be okay." He thought of the small stack of unpaid bills in the kitchen drawer. Suddenly, the safe, the tower, the man in the perfect suit all snapped into focus. It wasn't just a building to him anymore. It wasn't just a puzzle. It was a hand closing around his life without his permission. "Sir, we followed policy," the man with the dotted tie stammered. "The board approved the rent schedule, your office signed off." "My office?" Evan cut in. "Or my signature?" His eyes were sharp enough to cut. "Because there's a difference, and right now I'm wondering how many documents like this have my name on them without my knowledge." A heavy tension settled over the room. The woman with red glasses shifted uneasily. "We can do an internal review," she said. "Check every property, every file." "Yes," Evan said, "we will." He glanced at Noah, and for the first time his expression held something like guilt. "And we'll start with his building." Noah's head swam. Part of him wanted to feel relief at those words. Another part wanted to shout that it wasn't just his building, not just his life, but his tongue felt glued to the roof of his mouth. One of the other executives, a man with slicked back hair and a sharp jaw, cleared his throat. "With respect, sir," he said, his tone smooth but tight, "this is a lot to take in. We still don't know how this kid even managed to open the safe. For all we know, this is some kind of setup, a trick. Someone could be using him." "Using me?" Noah blurted, stung. "I just pressed numbers." "Exactly," the man said, as if he had proved something. "We have no idea how he knew them. That door has been sealed for 2 years. We hired experts. We ran diagnostics. The manufacturer said the chance of someone guessing the code was 1 in 100 million. Now a boy from a building we're about to evict just walks in and pops it open. He looked at Evan. You have to admit it's suspicious. A ripple of uncertainty moved through the others. They hadn't thought of it like that, but now that he said it, their eyes narrowed. They saw the numbers shift again, not as a miracle, but as a possible threat. Noah looked from face to face, his cheeks burning. I wasn't guessing, he said, his voice shaking but stubborn. I watched, I counted, I thought about what people do when they're scared, I thought about what number might matter to you. He looked at Evan. I didn't even know this safe existed until today. I didn't even know you existed until you walked out of that car. The slick-haired man folded his arms. And yet you unlocked the one place our best security teams failed. That's a story the news would love. Poor kid cracks billionaire's safe, exposes secrets. Ever thought of that, sir? The word news made Noah's stomach drop even further. He imagined cameras, lights, people asking him questions he didn't know how to answer. He imagined his mother's face if she turned on the television and saw him standing barefoot in a penthouse next to the man who owned their building. Evan lifted a hand and the room went still. Enough, he said, not loud but with authority that cut through every doubt. I saw the logs. The safe has been sealed since the glitch. No one opened it. No one altered it. The access record shows nothing until today. He looked straight at Noah. Whatever happened here, whatever the odds were, he did it, and I made a promise in front of all of you. The words hung between them like a challenge. Some of the executives looked uncomfortable. $100 million was not a number they could shrug off. It sounded more like a legend than a real amount. Sir, the slick-haired man began carefully, about that, you made that offer as a joke. It wasn't a legal agreement. No contracts, no signatures. You could call it a motivational statement. A dramatic figure of speech. It doesn't have to be binding. The woman with red glasses nodded slowly. From a legal standpoint, he's right. There was no written contract. You were speaking casually. If we start giving away that kind of money based on offhand jokes, the board... The board, Evan interrupted, answers to me. His tone was ice now. And I answer to myself. He looked at Noah again, really looked, taking in the bare feet, the worn t-shirt, the eyes that still held fear and hope tangled together. I said what I said, $100 million if he opened that safe. He opened it. Noah's heartbeat thudded so loud he could barely hear the rest of the room. This was the moment. This was the part in stories where magic turned into real life, where wishes came true with a snap of a finger or the turn of a key. But this didn't feel like magic. It felt heavy, complicated, tangled up in papers and guilt and secrets and buildings with broken railings. The man with the dotted tie rubbed his forehead. Even if we set up a trust, he said, we'd have to structure it carefully. The media will tear this apart if it leaks. The board will demand answers. We'll need time to... Time is the one thing I've already wasted, Evan said quietly. He glanced at the photo of his daughter on the counter. Too much of it. He turned fully to Noah now, shutting out the noise of the others. Listen to me, Noah, he said, his voice softer than it had been all morning. If I put this money in your name, it won't fix everything overnight. It will bring attention you may not be ready for. People will try to use you, hurt you, pretend to care so they can take what's yours. Money doesn't just solve problems, it makes new ones. Noah's throat tightened. So you're not going to do it? He asked, his chest sinking. I didn't say that, Evan replied. I'm saying we have to be smart, careful. You deserve more than a pile of money you don't know what to do with. He paused. And there's another problem. Everyone tensed. What problem? The woman with glasses asked. Evan looked back at the safe, then at the papers, then at the photograph. Before I put a fortune in a trust, he said slowly, I need to know who inside my company has been lying to me, who changed my plans, who took a foundation meant to help kids like him and turned it into a machine that squeezes their families instead. He tapped the folder with the building photos. Someone wanted these files buried. Someone wanted this safe to stay closed. And they were willing to blame a glitch and tell me the documents were gone. The slick-haired man shifted uncomfortably. Sir, that was handled by your legal team and the compliance department. They. And who led that team at the time? Evan asked, his eyes steady and dark. There was a pause. The woman with red glasses answered in a small voice. It was Mr. Harlan, sir. He oversaw the legal review on the foundation and the property transfers, but he left last year, took that job overseas. Evan's jaw clenched. Convenient. The man with the dotted tie glanced at the tablet in his hands. We still have copies of his emails in the archives, he said. We can pull them, see what he told the board. Yes, Evan said, do that, quietly, and I want every property tied to these files reviewed today, especially Building 18B. Today, the man squeaked. That's today, Evan repeated. If a notice has been prepared for this boys' building, it is not to be delivered. Not to him, not to anyone. Effective immediately, there will be no evictions from that address until I say otherwise. Noah's knees almost gave out. The word eviction still scared him, but now there was a wall between it and his door, and that wall had a name. The same name written at the top of all the papers in the safe. Thank you, he whispered, not sure if the sound even reached Evan's ears. It's a start, Evan said, more to himself than to Noah. Before anyone could answer, the elevator dinged. Everyone's head snapped toward it at once. They had forgot anyone else existed outside that room, but the world had not stopped just because a safe door had opened. The elevator door slid apart and Mark, the security guard from downstairs, stepped out breathless, a small earpiece pressed to his ear. His face was tight, worried, and when he saw the open safe and the gathered executives, he froze. Sir, he said, swallowing hard, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation. Evan's eyes narrowed. What kind of situation? Mark shifted his weight. There are people in the lobby asking about the boy. He jerked his chin toward Noah. They said they saw him come in with you. Some of them were at the cafe. One woman said she filmed you making that offer about $100 million on her phone. She's already posting it. It's spreading. The room exploded again, but this time not with laughter. Phones were snatched out of pockets. Messages lit up screens. The man with the dotted tie tapped furiously, his brows climbing. He's right, he said. There's already a clip on one of the big video platforms. It's shaky, but you can hear your voice clearly, sir. I'll put $100 million in your name if you can open that thing. People are sharing it. He looked up, eyes wide. We're trending. Noah's heart plummeted. The world outside this glass box suddenly felt closer, louder, dangerous. His mind raced with images of strangers watching him, judging him, talking about him like he was just a story, not a person. He imagined kids at school seeing it on their phones. He imagined his mother seeing his bare feet on a screen and dropping whatever she was holding. The slick-haired man ran a hand through his hair. We need a statement, he said quickly. We say it was a joke, a publicity stunt, a team-building exercise, something light. His eyes flicked to Noah. We can send the boy home with some cash, a scholarship promise, something that sounds good, and deny the rest. If we let this $100 million thing stand, investors will panic, the board will explode, reporters will camp outside. We can't just lie, the woman with red glasses protested. People heard him, they'll look for proof. If we spin too hard, it will blow up worse. Better a messy headline than an actual $100 million payout, Slickhair shot back. We have a duty to the company, to the shareholders. Evan listened to them argue for a few seconds, his expression unreadable. Then he lifted his hand again and the noise cut off like someone hit a switch. He looked at Noah, at the fear written all over his face, and then at the open safe, the photograph of his daughter, the foundation papers. The lines around his mouth deepened. Looks like the choice I was trying to take time with has been made for us, he said softly. The world already knows. Mark shifted uncomfortably near the elevator. There's more, he said. There's a guy downstairs in a cheap suit asking questions about the boy's address and about the property file. He says he's from a local news station, but his badge looked fake to me. Could be some kind of debt collector or someone else. He hesitated. He said he recognizes the kid from the building. Said the landlord has been waiting for a reason to push certain families out. Noah's blood ran cold. The landlord. The man who lived on the first floor, who always smelled of smoke and yelled at people on the stairs. The one who knocked on their door twice last month, asking when the rent would be in. The one who said, if you can't pay, there are other people who can. Did he give a name? Evan asked, his tone icy. Yeah, Mark said his name was Trent Harlan. The air snapped, several executives stiffened, trading shocked looks. The woman with red glasses whispered Harlan as in. Yes, Evan said, his voice ablaze now, as in my old lawyer. Noah's head spun. The man downstairs, the one asking about him, was the same name they had just mentioned, the man who had buried the foundation and turned promises into threats. Somehow, the person who wanted his building squeezed and his family pushed out had found his way into this tower on the very day the safe opened. It did not feel like an accident. Evan turned back to the safe and the papers scattered on the counter. He reached for the narrow wooden box with the silver latch, the only thing he had not touched yet. For a second his hand hovered above it. He looked at the photograph of his daughter, then at Noah, then at the elevator where his past mistakes were waiting in the lobby wearing a fake press badge. When he finally snapped the latch open and lifted the lid, his shoulders tensed so sharply that everyone in the room sensed it before they saw the contents. Inside the box, resting on a soft piece of blue velvet, was a small metal key and a folded note. The key was old, not shiny like the rest of the penthouse, with tiny numbers etched into the side. The note had only one line written in careful handwriting. Evan read it once and his face went even paler. "What is it?" the woman with red glasses asked, her voice almost a whisper. Evan did not answer, not right away. He set the box down, picked up the note again, and held it so tight his knuckles turned white. Then, in a voice that sounded like it was being dragged out of him, he said, "This key doesn't belong to this safe." He looked up, his eyes suddenly bright with a fierce, dangerous light Noah had not seen before. "It belongs to another one, somewhere else." "Another safe?" the man with the dotted tie echoed weakly. "Where?" Evan's eyes slid to the window, to the city sprawled out below, to the tiny shape of the river cutting through it, to neighborhoods of brick and concrete where people like Noah lived. "If this note is right," he said slowly, "it's in a place no one would expect, a place tied to these properties, to families like his." He nodded toward Noah. "And if that's true, then what's inside might be worse or better than anything in here." Noah's heart pounded, louder than ever. He had thought the steel monster in front of him was the biggest secret in the world. Now he realized it might just be the first lock on a much bigger door, a door that could change his life and his mother's, and maybe even the lives of every family who lived in buildings like his. Behind him, the executives started talking at once again, voices rising, words like risk and press and legal disaster tumbling out. In the middle of that noise, the elevator chimed softly again, a reminder that the man from the lobby, the one with the fake press badge and the old power over Evan's choices, was still waiting. Evan straightened, the note in one hand, the key in the other. His gaze locked on Noah with a strange mix of apology and resolve. "It seems," he said, "that opening one safe has just given us a much bigger problem and maybe our only chance to fix what was broken." He took a step toward the boy as voices swirled around them and the green light on the open safe blinked steadily like a heartbeat. "But if we go after this," he added quietly, "there's no going back." Before Noah could ask what that meant, before he could even take in the weight of those words, the door to the penthouse began to open again from the hallway, and a shadow fell across the threshold. A tall figure in a cheap suit, a familiar sharp voice already starting to speak, and the sound of trouble walking straight into the room. The door swung open before anyone could tell it to stay shut, and the man in the cheap suit stepped into the penthouse like he owned more of it than he actually did, shoulders squared, chin tilted up just enough to show he thought he was important, even if his tie knot sat crooked and his shoes were scuffed at the toes. He stopped just inside the doorway when he saw the open safe, the scattered papers, the gray faces of the executives, and Noah standing there in his bare feet. And for a split second something ugly flashed across his eyes, like he had walked into a room he thought would be dark and found it flooded with light. Then his mouth spread into a thin smile that never touched his eyes and he said, "Evan, there you are. I've been trying to reach you all morning," in a voice that sounded smooth on top but had something cold under it, the way a frozen pond might look pretty and still but could swallow you if you stepped wrong. Evan did not smile back, did not move to shake his hand, did not even pretend to be glad to see him. He simply studied the man as if he was a file he had forgot to read, his fingers still curled around the old key and the folded note as he said, You shouldn't be here, Trent, calmly, and the way he said the name made everyone in the room understand it was not a friendly visit. Trent's eyes flicked to the safe door again, then to the photograph on the counter, and for half a heartbeat his smile cracked, but he pushed it back in place so fast that someone who did not know how to look for patterns might have missed it. Only Noah caught it and his stomach tightened because he was used to seeing people hide things, like when his mom smiled at him even when she was about to cry, or when the landlord told them not to worry while slipping a folded paper under the neighbor's door. Trent took a step forward, ignoring the way the executive shifted to make space as if he carried a bad smell with him. I came as soon as I heard, he said lightly. A boy from one of our buildings comes in with you, the front entrance code gets used in a way no one expected, and now it looks like the whole city might be talking about it by lunch. I thought, as your former legal counsel and as someone who still cares about this company's image, I should offer a little damage control. He said, our buildings, like he was proud of that, like the cracked steps and broken mailboxes and peeling walls were trophies, and Noah felt heat crawl up his neck at the idea of this man caring about anything in his world. Before Evan could answer, the slick-haired executive jumped in, almost hungry for a way out, saying, we have a situation online, yes, but I'm sure with the right statement we can frame this as a harmless stunt, an inspiring little story, maybe throw in a scholarship angle. And he shot a quick glance at Noah like he was a prop, not a person. Trent's gaze slid the same way, and when his eyes landed on Noah, they sharpened, recognition sparking there as he said, you're from 18B, aren't you? Like he was matching a piece of trash to the right pile, and Noah's hands curled into fists at his sides. He did not answer, partly because he did not want this man to know anything about him, and partly because his throat had gone dry, his mind flashing back to the time he had seen that exact face at the building entrance months ago, arguing with the landlord about collections and dead-weight tenants, his voice loud enough to travel up the stairwell. What are you doing up here? Trent asked, his tone sweet on top, sour underneath. Did you just wander into the wrong door, or is this some new kind of charity program? His eyes flicked to the open safe again, and something greedy moved there like a fish snapping at a flash of food. Evan stepped between them then, not close enough to be threatening, but close enough that everyone knew exactly where the invisible line was. He's here because I invited him, Evan said. He's also the reason that safe is open. A ripple ran through the room again, even though everyone already knew that. It sounded different with those words coming from Evan's mouth in front of Trent, like a flag being planted in the middle of a war zone. Trent let out a short laugh that sounded wrong. You're telling me this kid cracked that vault, he said, nodding toward the safe. After security experts, engineers, manufacturers all failed, that is quite a story, almost too good to be true. His eyes narrowed on Noah. Who taught you how to do that, kid? Someone from outside. Someone with an interest in what's inside that safe? It was the second time in just a few minutes that someone had hinted Noah might be a puppet, and something inside him snapped just a little. He lifted his chin, forcing himself to meet those cold eyes, and said, nobody taught me, I watched, I thought, I figured it out. I didn't even know about that safe or you or anything in there before today. His voice shaking at the edges but still standing, and for a boy who had spent most of his life trying to be invisible, that was something. Trent studied him as if he was reading fine print on a contract, then shrugged. Well, he said, turning back to Evan, whatever the case, you need someone who understands the mess you're in. That video down there, the one the cafe girl posted, it has your promise clear as day. $100 million in your name. That's not just going to make investors nervous, that's going to make every lawyer in the city start thinking of angles. You think no one will try to argue this kid has a legal claim? You think no one will try to sue if you don't pay? He smiled in a way that did not reach his eyes. It would be easier to say it was a joke, a misunderstanding, maybe even claim the clip was edited from separate conversations. People will believe anything if you say it clean and fast. The slick-haired executive nodded quickly, jumping at the lifeline. We were just saying that, he added. Spin it as a stunt, give the boy something generous but not insane, move on. For a moment, Noah's tiny flicker of hope wavered like a candle hit by a strong breath. He wasn't stupid. He knew people like Trent could twist words, could turn promises into jokes and mistakes and things that never really happened. He had watched grown-ups do it his whole life when bills came due or when teachers called home about behavior. He glanced at Evan, trying to read his face like he read keypad patterns, and what he saw there confused him. Anger, yes, and hurt, but also something like shame, something like a man standing on a cliff he had built himself and suddenly realizing how high up he was. Evan didn't look away. He let the silence stretch until even the humming air vents seemed loud, everyone waiting for him to grab the rope Trent was holding out. Then he dropped the note from the wooden box onto the counter and set the old key next to it, the tiny scratching sound cutting through the quiet like a match. "You always were good at making bad choices sound smart, Trent," he said in a low voice. "That's how we ended up here in the first place." Trent's jaw tight. "Excuse me?" he asked, a sharp edge slipping into his tone. Evan picked up one of the foundation folders and flipped it open to the page with the property list, tapping the line for 18B. "You told me the foundation files were lost," he said. "You told the board the plans were unworkable. You told me we needed to streamline assets and maximize returns." He lifted the page so Trent could see the small printed note at the bottom. "Reviewed by T. Harlan." "What you didn't tell me," Evan went on, his voice growing colder, "was that while you were telling me those plans were dead, you were sliding these buildings into a different file, one that turned them into sources of profit instead of relief. You didn't tell me my daughter's foundation was used as cover to push poorer families into tighter corners so we could squeeze them harder." A flash of panic, real and raw, shot across Trent's face before he masked it. "Those were business decisions," he said quickly, "approved by the board, signed off by your office, based on your recommendations," Evan cut in. "On the reports you prepared, on information you chose." His eyes sharpened again. "And now you show up here the moment the safe opens, the same safe that holds the proof of what you buried." The executives looked from one man to the other, an uneasy energy buzzing in the room. Some of them clearly had not known the depth of this. Some might have suspected things were not clean but chosen not to look too closely. Now they were being forced to stare straight at it, and none of them could pretend it was just a glitch in a machine. Mark shifted closer to the elevator, watching Trent like he was a threat, not a guest. The woman with red glasses pressed her lips together, her mind already racing through the legal fallout. The man with the dotted tie tapped something on his tablet, probably pulling up old emails as if the truth might jump out of the screen and rescue them. Trent's smile snapped back into place, tighter now. "You're angry," he said. "That's understandable. Grief makes people see patterns where there are none. Your daughter's death," he glanced at the photo on the counter, the one with the girl in the yellow dress. "It changed you. You needed someone to protect the company when you couldn't. That's what I did. I made decisions your softer side wouldn't have been able to stomach. Tough choices, necessary ones. You told me to keep things clean, so I did. I kept your name away from anything messy." Noah felt something hot flare up in his chest at the way Trent said "your daughter's death," like it was just a piece of data on a page instead of a real girl who laughed in the sunlight. Evan's hands clenched at his sides, the old key digging into his palm. "Don't talk about her like she was a line item," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You don't get to use her to defend what you did." Trent shrugged one shoulder. "I did what had to be done for the business," he said. "It's not my fault if you didn't want to see how the sausage was made. And now you're about to undo all of that because some barefoot kid guessed a code and a shaky video is making the rounds online." He nodded toward Noah. "This boy is not your responsibility. His eviction, his rent, his life, that's not on you. You bought those properties as investments. You can't fix every sad story tied to them. That isn't how the world works." Noah's fingers trembled. Eviction, rent, his life spoken about like it was a stain on a white shirt. For a moment he wanted to yell, to tell Trent about his mom's hands and the coin jar and the nights they huddled close when the heating barely worked. Instead, he bit the inside of his cheek so hard he tasted iron and forced himself to stay silent. Because something inside him whispered that this was a moment where one wrong word could break whatever fragile thing was shifting in Evan's mind. Evan studied Trent, then turned his back on him and walked to the window, staring out at the tiny cars and tiny people far below. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, but every person in the room leaned in to hear. "You're right about one thing," he said. "I can't fix every sad story. I can't bring my daughter back. I can't rewrite the choices I made when I listened to you instead of my own conscience. But I can decide what I'm going to do today, right now." He turned around and faced them again, first looking at Noah, then at the photograph, then at the open safe. "When she was sick," he said, and his voice roughened at the edges, "she asked me a question. She said, 'Dad, what's the point of having so much if people like them?'" He gestured vaguely toward the city outside. "Are still hurting." I told her we'd fix it, that we'd start small but we'd do something real. Then she died, and instead of keeping that promise, I let myself listen to people who told me to focus on numbers instead of faces." His eyes locked on Trent. "That was my mistake, one I'm done repeating." He walked back to the counter and picked up the old key again, turning it between his fingers. "This key," he said, "is for another safe, somewhere tied to these properties, somewhere you hoped I'd never look." Trent's jaw tightened again. "You don't know that," he snapped. "You're guessing." Evan unfolded the note and read aloud, "If you're reading this, it means you still care. This key opens the lock where the rest of the plan is hidden. You told me you wanted the families to feel safe. I told you we had to hide that safety where they live so no one could take it away. Start where the cracks are the worst." His voice shook slightly on the last line. "It's signed with her initials." He turned the paper so Trent could see the familiar letters at the bottom. She was the one who suggested hiding the second safe in one of the buildings, somewhere no one would think to look for wealth because all they ever see there is struggle. You knew that. You were in the room when we talked about it. You were the one who said it was romantic but impractical. Funny how the key ended up here in the same safe you told me we couldn't open." The executive stared at the note like it was a ghost. Suddenly, this wasn't just about a promise or a PR problem, it was about a girl who had wanted something good and a man who had twisted it. Trent wet his lips. "Look, even if that's true," he said, a little too fast, "running off on some wild chase for a mystery lock hidden in the projects while a media storm gathers around you is reckless. Let it go. Destroy the note if you have to. Seal this safe back up. We can say we found nothing of importance. Shut this down before it spirals." "Destroy it," Noah blurted before he could stop himself. Destroy what she wanted. After she drew hearts on those papers. He didn't know why his mind threw up that image, but he could almost see a girl with braids leaning over a table, doodling in the margins of serious documents while her dad talked about money and plans. It made his chest ache because it was exactly the kind of thing he would have done if he had a dad who sat at tables with him instead of disappearing. Every adult in the room turned toward him, and for the first time Noah did not wish to vanish. He stepped closer to the counter, his bare feet silent on the floor, and looked up at Evan. "You told her you'd fix it," he said quietly. "You said that just now. If you walk away again, then what was the point of her asking?" His voice trembled, but he kept going, the words pushing out of him from a place deeper than fear. "You tell people like him," he jerked his chin at Trent, "that they're right and then nothing changes. And people like me just keep hopping for something that never comes. If you close that safe and pretend we didn't see any of this, you're just like the numbers on those papers. They're one day, gone the next, and no one can trust you." For a 10-year-old, it was a dangerous thing to say to a man who owned towers and companies, but Noah had already crossed so many invisible lines that morning that one more didn't seem to matter. As soon as the words left his mouth, his heart thudded in terror, ready for anger, ready for someone to tell him to shut up and know his place. Instead, there was a silence he had not expected, a silence not of shock or offense, but of recognition, like the noise inside Evan's own head had finally been said out loud by a voice that wasn't his. Evan did not shout. He did not tell Noah to remember who he was talking to. He just stared down at the boy, and something in his expression softened, the hardness around his eyes cracking just enough that a hint of who he might have been before all of this showed through. "You're right," he said simply. "If I close that safe and pretend this never happened, I don't deserve her name on anything." Trent stepped closer, his calm starting to slip. "Think about this, Evan," he pressed. "Think about what you're risking. You start pulling at this thread and everything unravels. The board, the markets, your entire legacy. All for what? A kid from a building you own and a dead girl's dream. That's not good math." "Maybe not for you," Evan replied, "but I've spent too long letting other people do the math for me." He straightened, the decision settling around him like a coat that finally fit. "We're going to find that second safe." He looked at his team. "We will trace every property tied to these files. We'll start with 18B, the one this boy lives in. We'll inspect the basement, the utility rooms, any place a lockbox could be hidden, quietly at first. I don't want anyone tipped off until we know exactly what we're dealing with." Noah's heart jumped at the word basement. He thought of the dark, damp space under their building, the smell of wet concrete and rust, the flickering light that never stayed on for long. He had never liked going down there, even when the landlord sent him with trash. There were corners down there nobody used, corners even his curiosity had left alone. The thought that somewhere in that maze there might be another safe, another secret tied to the girl in the photo, made his skin tingle. The woman with red glasses nodded slowly. "We'll need contractors' records," she said, switching into work mode. "Plans from when the building was last renovated. If a safe was installed off the books, there might still be signs in the paperwork." The man with the dotted tie was already typing. "I'll pull the files," he said. "We can send a small team this afternoon. No company logos, no official vehicles, we'll just look like inspectors." Trent's eyes darkened. "You're making a mistake," he hissed. "You're letting guilt drive you." Not reason, you're going to blow up everything we built. Evan turned to him, and for the first time there was no hint of warmth in his gaze, no shared history, no old trust, just clear, cold distance. We didn't build this, he said. She did, and you tried to bury it. He glanced at Mark. Security will escort Mr. Harlan out. He's not to step foot in any Cole property again without my written permission. And I want his access to our internal systems revoked by the end of the hour. Trent's face flushed an angry red. You can't just erase me, he snapped. I know too much. I have copies, emails, deals. You think you can push me out and I'll just walk away? I can make this ugly for you, for your precious image, for your new little mascot. He jerked his head toward Noah. You think the public will love it when they discover that the poor kid you blessed came from a building you've been squeezing dry, that his mother signed papers under a company you own. They'll eat you alive. Noah flinched. Mascot, blessed, words that made him feel like a puppet again, but he also felt something else, a flicker of anger that Trent would drag his mom into this like she was a weakness, not the strongest person he knew. Don't talk about my mom, he burst out before he could stop himself. She works harder than anyone you know. If anyone's been squeezed, it's her, not you. His voice cracked on the last word, humiliation and fury mixing together. Trent opened his mouth to throw another jab, but Evan cut in first. You're right about one thing, he said. You do know a lot, enough to hurt us if you choose, enough to help us fix this if you decide not to go down with the ship you helped rot. Either way, you're out. Whatever happens next, you won't be the one steering it. He nodded at Mark. Walk him out. Mark stepped forward, his jaw set, and gestured toward the door. For a moment it looked like Trent might refuse, might make a scene right there in front of everyone, but then he smiled that thin, empty smile again. This isn't over, he said in a low voice only those closest could hear. You think opening that safe gave you power. You have no idea what's out there waiting when the rest of the world smells blood. Remember that when your board starts asking why their stock is on a roller coaster. He let his gaze slide to Noah one last time, and there was nothing nice there, nothing kind. And you, he said softly, better hope you know what you've started, kid. Sometimes when doors open, the things behind them aren't friendly. A chill ran down Noah's spine. For a second he wanted to run home and hide under the thin blanket on his bed, forget the tower, the safe, the promise. But a deeper part of him knew there was no going back now. He had already stepped through a door. Whatever was on the other side would come whether he hid or not. Mark guided Trent out, the elevator doors closing behind them with a dull thud that sounded like the end of something and the start of something else all at once. The room sagged a little after he left, the tension not gone but changed. The executives exhaled like they had been holding their breath. Phones buzzed, messages came in. The outside world was still spinning. The video was still spreading. The board would still demand answers. But for a little pocket of time in that glass box above the city, everything narrowed to the boy with bare feet and the man with a key in his hand. Evan turned back to Noah. How's your mother? He asked suddenly. The question caught Noah off guard. She's at work, he said. At the laundry, he hesitated. She thinks I'm at the library. A faint, humorless smile tugged at the corner of Evan's mouth. Then we have that in common, he said quietly. Lying to the people who trust us. Noah stared at the floor, guilt creeping in. I just wanted to see the building, he mumbled. I didn't think any of this would happen. Evan shook his head. I'm not blaming you, he said. If anything, I'm starting to think you were exactly where you needed to be. He glanced at the woman with red glasses. We'll need to speak to his mother, he said. Soon, preferably before she sees any of this on a screen. Can someone find out where she works and arrange transport? The woman nodded, already typing. I'll have someone discreet pick her up and bring her here, she said. We can say it's about the property, which in a way it is. Noah's heart leaped into his throat. His mom here, in this place? He tried to picture her standing on this shiny floor under these high ceilings talking to a man like Evan. He could not. It felt like trying to imagine two different worlds touching without cracking. She's going to be mad, he whispered. She told me not to get in trouble. I think this is big trouble. A soft chuckle came from one of the quieter executives in the back, a woman with a calm face who hadn't spoken much. Kid, she said, big trouble is when nobody cares. This is a mess, but it's one we might be able to turn into something better if we don't mess it up more. It was the closest thing to comfort he had heard from anyone besides Kayla all day. Speaking of Kayla, Noah's thoughts jerked down to the street. What about the cafe lady? He blurted. She's the one who gave me the muffin and, he trailed off, realizing he was rambling, but he couldn't help it. He suddenly worried for her too if the video really had spread. If she gets in trouble because of me. We'll deal with it, Evan said. I'm not about to punish someone for pointing a camera at something I chose to say in public. He picked up the will again and folded it carefully, almost gently, then slid it back into the black envelope. Right now we focus on three things, he said, more to the room than to Noah. protecting this boy and his mother from whatever fallout is coming, finding that second safe, and deciding how we honor that promise in a way that doesn't destroy him or this company. The slick-haired executive, who had been quiet since Trent left, raised a hand a little like a student in class. "Sir," he said, "about that promise. If the video keeps spreading, you might not have the luxury of taking your time. Reporters will come. The board will scream. If you don't come out with a clear plan, someone else will build one for you. Maybe that lawyer, maybe a court, maybe the internet. None of those options are good." Evan nodded slowly. "Then we'll give them something they can't twist so easily," he said. His eyes flicked back to Noah. "You want to help your mother, right?" "Yes," Noah said without hesitation. "You want to help other families like yours." He thought of the kids in his building, the ones who played in the hallway when it rained because the playground outside turned into a mud pit. He thought of the old man on the second floor who coughed all night. "Yes," he said again, even though his voice shook. "Then we don't just hand you a check and hope for the best," Evan said. "We build something that lasts, a trust with rules that protect you from people like Trent, a foundation that starts with your building and spreads out, and we do it in the open so no one can bury it again." His gaze hardened. "If I'm going to fight for this, I want the world to see exactly what we're fighting for." The idea of the world seeing him made Noah's stomach flip, but the idea of fixing something bigger than his own apartment lit a tiny flame inside him. It was scary, but it was also good. Different. Maybe the kind of thing his teacher meant when she told him he was meant for more, even when he came to school in the same shirt 3 days in a row. The man with the dotted tie cleared his throat. "Sir, the media requests are already piling up," he said. "If you're going to speak, doing it soon might help us control the story, but we still need to find that second safe. If it has more information about the foundation, about the properties, we want that in our hands before anyone else realizes it exists." Evan nodded. "Then we split up," he said. "You," he pointed to the dotted tie man, "pull every document on 18BU, he nodded at the calm-faced woman, "coordinate a small inspection team. No uniforms, no logos. I want them in that basement today. Look for anything out of place. A false wall, a locked hatch, anything." "What about me?" Noah asked before he could stop himself. Every adult in the room turned toward him again. For a second the answer seemed obvious: send him home, hide him, keep him away from danger. But then the calm-faced woman spoke up. "He knows that building better than any of us," she said. "He knows which stair creaks, which door sticks, which room nobody uses. If there's a hidden safe, he's our best map." The thought of going down into the basement with strangers made Noah's heart slam against his ribs, but he also felt a stubborn push inside. This had started with him, hiding upstairs while other people crawled through the dark, felt wrong. "I can show them," he said quietly, "if you want." Evan studied him. "It might not be safe," he warned. "If someone doesn't want that safe found, they might be watching that building. They might try to stop us." Noah swallowed. He thought of Trent's warning, of the landlord's hard eyes, of shadows in stairwells. "People already try to stop us every day," he said. "With notices, with rent, with broken things they don't fix. I'm tired of just being scared. If there's something down there that can help, I want to find it." A long moment stretched between them, then Evan nodded once, a small, firm motion. "All right," he said, "we'll do it together, but not without telling your mother first." He glanced at the woman with red glasses. "How soon can she be here?" The woman checked her phone. "The driver just texted," she said. "He's pulling up at the laundry now. She'll be here in about 20 minutes. 20 minutes? It wasn't long in grown-up time, but to Noah it felt like an entire lifetime squeezed into a small box. He imagined his mom stepping into a car she did not order, her heart pounding, her mind racing. He imagined her hands twisting the strap of her bag as the city flashes past the window. He imagined her stepping into this lobby, onto this elevator, into this room full of glass and suits. His stomach fluttered with fear and a strange kind of hope. "Until she arrives," Evan said, "we prepare." He handed the old key to the calm-faced woman. "Make copies?" she asked. He shook his head. "Not yet, one secret at a time." She nodded and slipped it into a small zippered pocket inside her blazer like it was made of gold. Noah drifted toward the window while the adults started moving again, calling people, sending messages, pulling files. From up here the city looked like a board game. Tiny blocks, tiny cars, tiny lives. Somewhere down there, his mom was wiping her hands on her apron, confused and worried as someone told her a rich man wanted to talk about her apartment. Somewhere down there, kids from his building were playing on the cracked sidewalk, skipping over the spot where the pavement never fully dried. Somewhere down there in the basement he tried not to think about, there might be another door waiting for the right touch. His own reflection looked back at him in the glass, a small boy in a big world hair messy shirt with a whole bare feet on a floor that had never known dirt. He placed his palm against the cool surface, fingerprints smudging it just a little. For the first time in his life, he felt like his touch actually mattered, like he had left a mark that couldn't be wiped away with one swipe. Behind him, Evan's voice rose again, this time on a call with someone Noah couldn't see. He heard words like press conference, statement, controlled environment. Another voice through the speaker, calm and polished, probably a PR expert they kept on speed dial for days when things went wrong. If you're going to lean into this, the voice said, you need the boy there. People will want to see him, hear from him. It's not enough to talk about him. Noah's shoulders tensed. He didn't like the idea of being marched in front of cameras like a show-and-tell object. But he also understood in a way he couldn't fully explain that hiding would let other people fill in his story for him. They would call him dumb or lucky or a liar. They would say it was all a trick. If he stayed silent, his voice would belong to whoever shouted the loudest. He thought of his teacher who once said, "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand where everyone can see you and refuse to be what they expect." Back then, it was about reading his essay aloud in class. Now it felt like that lesson had come back wearing a much bigger coat. As the minutes ticked by, the room became a strange mix of chaos and focus. Screens lit up with charts and messages, hands pointed at lines and numbers, voices talked over each other about legal risks and media angles and property lists. In the middle of it all, the open safe stood like a quiet mouth that had finally spoken, its shelves no longer hiding, the photograph and folders out in the light. Every now and then, Noah's eyes drifted back to that picture of the girl in the yellow dress, her laugh frozen in time. He wondered what she would have thought of him. Would she have liked him? Would they have been friends if life had arranged their pieces differently? The elevator dinged again, softer this time but somehow louder in his chest. Every head turned. The door slid open and there she was, his mother standing in the doorway with her hair pulled back in a simple knot, laundry soap still faintly marking her hands, her work shirt wrinkled from the rush, eyes wide and dark as they took in the sparkling room, the strangers, the man in the perfect suit, and her barefoot son standing in the middle of it all.